Welcome to today's Students, Tomorrow's Talent. I'm your host, Dakota Palicki, and we're delighted to have you with us today for part 2 of our conversation about returning students. In part 1, we heard from adult learners who worked their way back to higher education after being out for many years. They told us about the challenges they face and the kind of supports that help them get back to school. Today, in part 2, we will focus on a couple of places that are working hard to provide those kinds of supports to adults in their region. We will start with Malik and Sena from Graduate Philadelphia, a nonprofit organization that supports adults in coming back to school to complete their degrees and credentials. After the break, we'll go to California State University, Sacramento, to hear about the new policies and programs they are putting in place to serve the thousands of adults in their community that have yet to earn a credential but have some college credit. Let's get started. With me now is Malik Brown and Sena Owereko from Graduate Philadelphia. Malik, Sena, thanks so much for spending some time with me today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, of course. Malik, I kind of want to start with you. Let's jump straight in. Tell us a little bit more about what Graduate Philadelphia is, what you do, and what the kind of challenges that you're focused on locally.
Well, first of all, Dakota, just thank you so much for having me and Sena, for having Graduate Philadelphia share our voice. You are such an amazing friend and transformational leader in the country, and it's an honor to be with you and your colleague today. To jump right in, Graduate Philadelphia was formed in 2005 as a response to the brain drain in Philadelphia and to the response of employers saying that they didn't have enough diverse talent. There was some research done that said that there were over 100,000 Philadelphians who had some post-secondary credit but never completed a 2 or 4 year degree. The term adult comebackers was then coined, and there were efforts to go out and recruit and provide wraparound services to these adults that were making above a federal minimum wage, but significantly made below a living wage or a family sustaining job. And we knew as a part of our local economic context that if we could upskill, reskill, provide the kind of professional development to these individuals and households and communities, that not only could we help to increase social and economic mobility for so many households in Philadelphia, but we would also provide a talent pipeline for so many small, mid, and large employers in Philadelphia that needed talent, but needed talent at the right skill level. In today's iteration of Graduate Philadelphia, we have integrated workforce credentialing, workforce development credentialing with our degree completion efforts. And in addition to that, as part of our theory of change and a part of our impact that we're trying to make, we want to make sure that the credential that an individual receives is only a vehicle to getting to what we're calling our North Star of economic mobility, right? The idea that we are helping families and individuals and communities move forward. The idea of Graduate is to take steps forward, right? And that could mean buying your first home. It can mean moving into a safer community. It can mean sending your child to college without debt, right? And that is what we're trying to do. Credentialing is a vehicle to greater financial and economic security for so many families across our region.
Mm. Yeah, Sena, I know you've been with the organization for almost a year. I remember meeting you when you first came on. So congratulations on your almost work anniversary. You're the vice president of programming innovation. What are some of the specific things that Graduate Philadelphia does to address the challenge and goals that Malik just laid out for us?
Oh, fantastic question, Dakota. Thank you. Well, we have the honor and privilege, I like to refer to it as being able to sit at this intersection of workforce, of higher education, of employers, and community-based organizations. So with our programming, part of that is really being responsive to the needs of our stakeholders, anchored on the services that we provide to adult learners. And a big part of that service portfolio is our career integrated learning advising, where we're actively engaged in alignment of the individual adult learners' needs. So as Malik alluded to, the credentialing, the long-term planning around degree completion, as well as the alignment with the job opportunities, living wage opportunities, family sustaining wage opportunities with our employer network as well. And so through the career integrated learning advising, individuals have a psychologically safe space to really talk about their needs. We're able to address the barriers that show up at various points in the adult learner journey a little bit more proactively, and help individuals not just start some of these phenomenal programs in the region through higher ed and learning partners, but also persist to completion. In addition to that, we offer services to our employer partners around developing their frontline incumbent workforce. So that includes programming specific to the needs of the employer, as well as that alignment, once again, to the continuum of learning opportunities that are available to them.
I love that approach too, because I think sometimes, for folks that don't live in this world, what we think of oftentimes is, it's a coaching program. You take a person, you help them get into a pathway. But, you're doing so much more than that. You're bringing together, like you said, you're sitting at the intersection. You're bringing together community organizations, higher institutions, workforce providers, businesses, et cetera, all around the same table. And, the second point is, there's this growing sentiment, or maybe it's not even growing, but this sentiment out there that, we can't find these adult students. We take out bus ads, we advertise on social media, but they're just not coming to us. And you just said something to me, which is such an anchor. Like you're working with employers to help, particularly frontline employees. What does that look like? What's the conversation with an employer have with you in order to help us, someone who is in a frontline position kind of get the education and training they need to, continue to advance in their career?
Well, part of that is a really honest, intentional discussion around some of the gaps in the needs. We are of the mindset of really looking at what's working well and enhance that, and also stand firmly in discussions around where the gaps are, where the pain points are, because that's really where some of the keys to innovation lie with some of the work that we do with employer partners. So that, for the partners that we're currently working with, includes a couple of different areas. One is the professional development, really making a robust program for frontline individuals, giving them access to opportunities that may not ordinarily be afforded to them. For example, leadership development, which still for so many organizations is reserved for a significant few. And individuals that are on the front line are often, as we're starting to see more research, a really rich wealth of talent within an organization. So that leadership opportunity has become significant in the conversations. Also around leveraging things like their tuition assistance programs. For many employers, there's still low adoption of those programs. So we couple that with our advising to really identify opportunities for individuals to complete 2-year, 4-year degrees and the industry credentialing relevant to that particular employer. We've also, because of our work being undergirded by DEI, we've started to work across the organization around supporting some of their DEI strategic initiatives, as well as some of their long-term business goals around creating inclusive environments.
To Sena's point, I think what we're anchoring to are issues around equity and access. We hear all the times, well, I just can't find enough diverse talent, and we have to challenge those assumptions respectfully, diplomatically, but forcefully. When we go in and we talk to different employers, we are trying to find champions at all levels of the organization. So we may go in and talk to the CEO, of an employer first. We may talk to the CHRO, the Chief Human Resource Officer, or someone that's leading a line of business. But we know that once we get that kind of CEO buy-in, there are critical operational conversations that we need to have, throughout the chains of command, right? Once you get to that talent acquisition leader, there may be some conversations that need to have to really help people understand, historical inequities, lack of access, lack of, intentionality around reaching out to communities that don't necessarily look like what you have historically recruited, right? And sometimes those conversations, Dakota and Sena, as Sena knows, are tough. They're challenging. It takes a level of change management expertise and finesse, but I think it really takes strategic patience and really connecting with people at a human level, right? To kind of speak about your experience, to be vulnerable, to really help change hearts and minds. And that's not going to happen overnight. And so this is the work that we really enjoy. I love partnering with Sena and going in and talking to so many organizations about this topic. And sometimes they get it right away. And other times it takes 3 and 4 and 5 touch points, to really get an organization to buy into to issues around equity and inclusion.
I think that's such an important point. One of the distinctions about you all is that you're an independent 501c3 organization. A lot of times when we're having conversations about what needs to change to make sure people can progress through education training programs, through their careers, to make sure we have the right workforce we need and a diversified workforce. We end up talking a lot to individual actors. What could higher ed do? What could an employer do? But you all have a unique position in that you're an independent 501c3 organization. And, you and I, Malik, we kind of talk a lot about what it means to try to be a neutral convener, someone who can go in and advance, an agenda, if you will, on behalf of the people in the region versus, a single organization's priorities. You've already talked a little bit about, how you're advancing a conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion within the business community. What other conversations are you having with other people sitting at that intersection again to advance DEI throughout the region?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dakota. And again, thank you just, for bringing this, this topic to bear. We were really fortunate, to get through 2020. As you remember it well. It was the pandemic. It was the murder of George Floyd. Cities shut down, cut budgets. And we were really fortunate to have good friends and good partners, like you and others who helped us get us through a tough time. That was a year that we became our own 501c3 corporation and started operations independent of our former parent company. It gave us the strategic freedom and the economic independence to go out and fundraise the way we needed to and set our charter and our agenda based on a local board of governance. And it gave us the creativity and the innovation to sort of move forward, right, in our local economic context. It was challenging, it was rewarding, but at the end of the day, we were able to bring on great people like Sena, and we went from having a staff of 2 to now a staff of 8. We've attracted some new funders like Bank of America and United Way and the Philadelphia Foundation and Kresge, and we're just really excited about executing against our vision of really having systems level impact in Philadelphia. I will say, to answer your question directly, as far as being a strategic convener, it's not just employers, right? It's really that Lumina Foundation talent hub model of bringing together, multiple stakeholders around a common agenda. And that common agenda is really alleviating poverty, for so many Philadelphians. We have so many that are the working poor, right? We have people who are working every day with grit and tenacity and a yearning to do better for themselves and their families and their communities. And they have a job and they're making above a federal minimum wage, but they're making below a living wage. And there's a huge skills gap that requires organizations like a Graduate Philadelphia to be able to bring these multiple stakeholders together around this common agenda of economic mobility, right? And so that's the higher ed community, right? That's another big stakeholder group, because so many higher eds still believe that higher ed is there just for the sake of higher learning. You do have some more progressive higher ed communities that get it, that understand their civic duty, that understand that their purpose may need to be reimagined to not only be a place for academic achievement, but also to be a place for cultural enrichment, to be a place that prepares people for their future of work and for automation and for the jobs of the future. There are higher eds that get that they have to be in communities, really helping to lift up communities and giving people education and economic opportunity that alleviates and mitigates violence, right? So there are some higher eds that get it and there's some that don't. And we're here, as a convener to bring together higher eds with employers. And we also bring together communities. There's so many great community-based nonprofits that are doing great work in their local communities. And sometimes they don't have a partner like a Graduate Philadelphia that can provide the kind of educational coaching and learning coaching that Sena spoke about, that can kind of bring that kind of opportunity to their local communities and to households and individuals. So that's the kind of role that we're endeavoring to play. It is part of our new value proposition to not only provide direct programming to adult comebackers, but really to be that convener, Dakota, that you spoke about, that are bringing together these key stakeholders to lift Philadelphia up in a bigger way.
Mm-hmm. I also want to go back to, something you had said earlier, Sena, which is about, really figuring out and helping, sometimes close gaps or help people get over obstacles and barriers. Part one of this show, we heard directly from some comebackers, reconnectors, depending on the word that the local folks use, adults who are going back. And, we heard all sorts of challenges. Hey, I had to change my job because my current employer wouldn't really work with the class schedule that I have to take. Other folks, just trying to navigate the application system, FAFSA, et cetera. As you're looking at the kind of, all your programs that you offer, all the people that you support, what do you see as some of the common challenges that adults who are trying to re-enter a workforce training program, a higher education program, encounter that you find yourself continually solving for over and over and over again?
Great question, Dakota. And just to go back to your example of, institutions and organizations putting money into billboards and wondering why individuals aren't coming, one of the initial barriers is the sense that adult learners sometimes have that those environments were not built for them. When we talk about inclusion, when we talk about a sense of belonging, that is something that comes up consistently. And so part of our creating that psychological space is really helping to provide the confidence that's needed sometimes to face this challenge. Also just normalize the fact that this can be overwhelming. There's some significant opportunities, which is fantastic. And often the adult learners that we're working with may understand what they need to do. It's the how. Right? I've been told I need to go back to school, but how do I do that? Navigating, as you said, a complex work schedule and responsibilities of taking care of my household, which may involve, one child or more. About 78% of our current adult learner base have at least one child in the household. So there are childcare considerations. There's the cost of education, right? The costs that aren't necessarily covered by traditional scholarships and grants, and the gaps that stand in those spaces. And also, the alignment. Too often, there's still the experience where an individual may go through a program without a clear sense of what the intended purpose is for them, the potential benefits for them. And that's why our career integrated learning really helps them to really think about their learning experience in the context of both their short-term and long-term planning. Homelessness, housing insecurity, these are considerations that come up. And so for us, it's really important with all our stakeholders to normalize conversations around this. The Hope Center recently did a study where about 53% of the parenting students identified that they had faced housing insecurity within the past year prior to the survey. These are significant considerations. So when you're telling someone to sit in class and they're not sure where they may be laying their head that evening or where the food might be coming from for their household, it's really important for us to be able to provide the supports. And so for us, we do that through direct professional referrals to many of our community partners that are in these spaces doing significant work with the certainty that they will get the services that they need as well, in addition to helping them with their learning supports as well.
Yeah, I so appreciate that because, again, it is another example of where, you really do need people who sit at that intersection and help folks navigate that system and also improve the system itself. Because already you're touching on areas where there's likely so many different programs, so many different providers that someone would have to navigate just to try to go back and, get the next credential they need to live a more prosperous life. You all have been on such, Graduate Philly has been such a wonderful organization to follow for a long time. I've really enjoyed following the trajectory of it. Malik, seeing you come into leadership, Sena, seeing you join, and, Malik, like you just said, growing the staff considerably. You've had such a meteoric rise that I almost, wonder, like, what's coming next? What's your future look like? What's the master plan?
Dakota, you got to give me like 20 minutes, to talk about this master plan, but I know I only have like 2. So, Sena has a saying that, what is your saying, Sena? It's bold enough, but doable. Is that what it is?
It's bold enough to work. It's bold enough to work.
So, we're crazy enough in Dakota to think that we can change the world. And, part of the sort of cultural, tests that we do as we're hiring new people is we want folks, to have an understanding that we're in build mode, right? And we have such a long runway. We've accomplished so much in 18 months. We have so much more to do. And we have to have folks that are willing to have a mentality that we are crazy and bold enough that we believe that we can change the world. And for us, the world starts with greater Philadelphia, starts with Philadelphia, expands to the 5 counties. It eventually will include Camden, which is right over the bridge, would include parts of Delaware. And that's where we're going to kind of plant our flag and make our impact, right? And we're going to be intentional, about that geographic footprint. But really, the North Star of Dakota is to really do what has not been done, for decades. You alluded to in your previous question that there are so many amazing organizations, workforce development organizations, social service organizations, community-based organizations. And these organizations get up every day and work hard to make a difference. But we see, just from the data that there are families that are struggling, that there are communities that are struggling, that Philadelphia has a 26% poverty rate, one of the highest in the country, for a large metro. And Sena and I and our team believe that we can help move the needle by being a strategic convener, by setting a bold vision, by bringing communities into the conversation, right? We talked about a lot of Dakota over the years with civic labs that, how do we set an agenda and charter if we're not bringing the voice of those that we endeavor to serve into the conversation, even going further and bringing them onto our board of directors, right? And making them a part of our advisory councils, right? So that we're doing the work with them and not for them. How do we, really be bold and take action? And we've done some of this in hiring government relations firms that can go in and talk to city council about policy change, talk to Harrisburg about state level change, and even go to talk to our federal legislators about policy change as it relates to adult learners and adult comebackers and those that are endeavoring to make their communities better and their lives better through education, through workforce development, and what Sena and I call the missing ingredient around social capital, building social capital for those that have been marginalized, in our communities, right? So that they have access to people like Dakota, to people like Malik and Sena and other influential leaders that can make their lives better. How do we build that social capital for our communities? So we're excited to be a leader, to move the needle around poverty, to move the needle around economic mobility, and not just be a player in this space, but to be the player, in greater Philadelphia. When families think about how do I take a step forward in my life, we want them to say Graduate Philadelphia is that organization that can help them take a step forward, in their life. So now I'll turn it over to you for other reactions.
Oh, well said. I was just going to say world domination, but you said it so much better, Malik. And the other thing in terms of our work is really making it more of a practice to lean into the friction. And Malik has heard me say this several times, that, for us, leaning into the friction is really where we start to identify solutions, long-lasting solutions, being able to provide that, feedback loop to all the stakeholders because of the position that we sit in at the intersection, to be able to give them real-time feedback, to be able to be responsive to the needs of the population. And for me, from a programming perspective, continuing to serve as the strongest voice for adult learners in terms of giving them agency and teaching them how to advocate for themselves and then become advocates effectively for others.
Well, it is an incredible plan. I do think it is bold enough to work. And Sena, I just love that, leaning into the friction. I think that's something we can all do and take from. And again, you're just, Graduate Philadelphia is so well poised to do that kind of work and to lean into the friction in a very authentic way. Thank you, Malik, Sena, for spending a little bit of your time with me today and for sharing so much about your work. If folks want to go and learn more about you, where should we point them to?
Sena?
They can certainly visit our website. So that's graduatephiladelphia.org, graduatephiladelphia.org, and there'll be some new resources on there for individuals soon. So definitely worth taking a look. And if they have any needs for advising services, there is also an intake form right on the homepage for them to sign up and begin their journey with us.
That's great. So if you're listening from the Philadelphia region and you or know somebody who could benefit from a conversation, I hope you all check that out. But Malik, Sena, thank you so much for spending some time with me today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dakota.
Thank you.
It's great to be with you.
Hey everyone, welcome back. I want to bring you now to California State University, Sacramento, where we're here with Dr. Ed Mills and Kaley Martin, here to tell us a little bit more about what they're doing to support returning adult students. Dr. Mills, Kaley, thank you so much for joining me today. Really glad to have you.
Thanks for having us.
Good afternoon.
Yeah. So, Dr. Mills, maybe you can start us out. What is the opportunity? What's it look like in Sacramento that you've decided to really prioritize returning adults onto your campus?
Mm-hmm. Well, we've been looking at this population for some time and really realizing that there are so many adults in the greater Sacramento region that have accumulated units but have not yet earned their degree. And so it's important to us to reach out to the community to offer opportunities for students to really look at how they can finish their degree and how we can help as a university to overcome many of life's barriers that crop up that prevent individuals from being able to get their degree.
Mm. And, I know you've done some math on this, and you guys have gotten really sophisticated about figuring out, how many people we're talking about in the region, et cetera. What's the population look like that you're trying to support on their way back into Sac State?
Yeah, I think I believe it's something like 400,000 in the Sacramento region have some college, no degree. And then like 62,000 have within 15 units of completing. So they're near completers who are so close to finishing and just need a semester or two.
Yeah, and clearly that that larger number is not just students who once was enrolled at Sacramento State, right? That's the region in total. Am I right there?
Yes, yeah. And then we have, looking back to 2007, at Sac State, we have more than 12,000 people who started and then left before completing their degree, who are over the age of 25. And then there are 2,700 of those folks who are near completers within about 15 units of completing.
I think that's so incredible. There's so many of those, of students who are really close to completing that first credential. You all have been putting in some new programs and some new policies to not only reach out to those that are near completing, but also those that might be a little bit further from completing to help them get in and get through. Just tell us a little bit about some of the things that you're doing there.
I think a lot of the outreach initially really is just to connect with our previous students and say to them, hey, we recognize that you've earned units already towards your degree, and we'd like to help you with a path to return and finish. And from that, initially we'll have a consultation with the student. We'll do an update to their credit evaluation, where they are in their programs, or even if they want to change programs. I mean, often students that have been out of school for some time, they may have a different career path in mind, something they've already started down that's different than the units that they originally took when they first started in college. So it all starts really with the outreach and that initial consultation to find out, what's going on for the student, what are their career goals, how can the degree assist them and support them in those goals, and then kind of coming back into how can we help those students to build not only a bridge back to higher ed, but a pathway to be able to finish that degree, even if it's one class at a semester, if that's what they can do right now. Or there are students who are in a position where maybe they want to stop what they're doing, come back full time and finish. So it runs the gamut of the perspectives. But I think really the initial outreach, making sure students know that it's available, and that initial consultation is really important.
And Kaley, maybe you can talk a little bit too, because you've all put a name on this called Hornet Attain. What is Hornet Attain all about?
So this work has been happening at Sacramento State since people left. They've just gone back to their professors or admissions or whoever their best contact was, and they've kind of come back or have found their way back organically. But because of some of the work that we were doing at Sac State through the Institute for Higher Education Policies Degrees When Due work, as well as some other pieces like Project Attain in the community, we really wanted to put some structure around it and an umbrella that some of these pieces could fall under. So we created Hornet Attain. And that's really it's institution-wide. We have collaboration from the College of Continuing Ed, Student Affairs, Admissions, Registrar's Office, Student Affairs, Academic Affairs, Institutional Research, pretty much almost anybody on campus we've tried to partner with in this effort. And it's really about re-engaging stopped-out learners. And then we also know that they left for a reason the first time and are particularly vulnerable if we get them back to leaving again. So we want to make sure that our one shot to get them back through and finished is accessible. So in addition to that outreach piece that Ed talked about, we're also doing a lot of really hands-on support to make sure that they are prepared and that they're ready, and connecting them to the services that they might need and being that contact with them as they persist and complete.
Yeah, it's such a great approach. And I know I was just out in Sacramento not that long and had a chance to attend one of your comebacker panels and hear from students that have really benefited from it. One of the things that we heard in part one of this show is one of the challenges that institutions are uniquely poised to do something around is that when you're trying to come back to school, maybe you've been out 10 years or 15 years. And Dr. Mills, like you said, you might want to go into a different field, but you do have these prior credits. How hard is it to honor and recognize the prior credit that might have been done years and years ago onto a pathway today so we can make sure someone, gets the education they need, but also doesn't have to start completely over again?
Yeah, I think that's really important for students that are returning. And, the good news is that the first half of their degree, what we call the general education units, those are going to be pretty much transferable to any pathway you want to go. Sometimes in a specialty area like nursing or engineering, there may be a lower division class that's very specific to that major, but the overwhelming majority of those classes are going to work for all the different majors. So students that may have stopped out after their first 2 years, those units are going to last. They're still going to be current. They're still going to be able to utilize them. The other thing that is important is, for many of the majors, there's also elective units that are part of the major. So if we think about somebody who wants to go into communication studies or sociology, for instance, those majors have components where students can choose different electives. If they already have some of those units can be looked at for elective credit as well. And so that, again, really helps focus them on what are the core courses, the upper division major courses, the prerequisites that they might be missing one or two that can really help get them to the degree. And as Kaley mentioned, a large number of the students are actually very close, are typically in their senior year, and whether life has happened, maybe there's a financial issue, sometimes they've started a family, sometimes a job opportunity comes up. Whatever pulls somebody away from higher ed at that last moment, those are really good times to take a look at how can I get just those remaining units. And in the CSU, we do allow students to look at different, what we call catalog years or sets of requirements towards their major. And we'll use that catalog year that's the most advantageous for them based on the units they have, what they want to get their degree in. So it's important to us to find that best fit. And that's a lot of individual consulting, a lot of individual advising with a student to make sure that we're really looking at their circumstance and we do something that fits their need. That's what's most important.
Mm-hmm. I also hear too from students that financial aid, and obviously the cost of college is a big barrier, and perhaps you've used a lot of financial aid in the past, or when you stopped out, you also stopped paying the bills. Maybe you have a loan in default, or you still owe a back balance. How have you been helping students who have re-enrolled at Sac State, and have really leveraged the Hornet Team program, kind of overcome some of those financial obstacles? What have you had to change on your end to help them get there?
So one of the big pieces that we put in place was Hornet Debt Reset, which is the university committed $1 million to help returning students if they still owe an outstanding balance to Sac State. So if there's a few criteria they have to meet. They were in good standing. They've been out at least 2 semesters. We can only do things about money they still owe to Sac State, not federal loans or anything like that. But if they're committed to coming back, we will pay off their debt, any amount until we run out of money. And then the commitment from them is they stay at least 2 semesters or until they graduate, whichever comes first. And so it really helps. That outstanding debt piece is both a financial barrier and an emotional one. A lot of the reasons that we hear from folks about their concerns about coming back is they failed the first time and they just don't feel like they can do it. And then this debt is this reminder that not only did they fail, but they still owe money because of it. And so if we can eliminate that and give them that boost that says not only like, are you starting fresh, but also we really want you back and we're going to pay off what you owe us just so you can start clean and come back and finish. So that's one of the big pieces. We also have some scholarships in place. We have the Hornet Attain Degree Completion Scholarship. We're working on something called Comebacker Bucks, which is an additional incentive to get folks to come back quickly, as well as other scholarship opportunities on campus.
Yeah, I mean, institutional debt cancellation and forgiveness programs have just had such a massive impact, and I'm so glad to hear you bring those up. The Institute for Higher Education Policy, studied these a while back and found that for a lot of institutions, there's 120% return on investment. Hey, cancel or forgive this debt that has already been written off your books. Get someone back in the door, and not only does it help a student get back on their track to complete a credential, but there's a positive ROI for the institution as well.
Yep. And the average amount owed is $900. $900 to just give them that boost to come back.
And I think that can be really transformational for a student or their family. And as Kaley said, the emotional impact of that and being able to really think about how I can make this possible, it makes all the difference.
Dr. Mills, I appreciate, you've been in higher education for 35 years. You started as a financial aid coordinator and have been in this realm for a while. I have to ask, over you taught a first year experience course for, 17 plus years. From your perspective, really thinking over your career, how have you seen the conversation around supporting returning adult learners change over the course of time? Is this there's so much education that's cyclical. We find ourselves redoing the same thing that we did 20 years ago. Is this cyclical, or is this truly something that there's a growing movement that feels fresh to you?
I think it's really both. There was a movement in the late 80s and early 1990s, not only new research coming out about andragogy, the teaching of adult students, a lot of emphasis at colleges and universities across the country about returning adult students at that time, in really looking at the market of students that was out and available that might not be just in the traditional 18 to 22 or 22 or 23-year-old student. And that market is available. It's large, it's diverse. And so there was a lot of attention to it. And then again, I think in times where applications are many, a lot of universities, don't pay as much attention to returning adult students. And so in that sense, it's cyclical to come back again. But I really think that this is a fresh start. And not only because of, things like Project Attain or our Hornet Attain program, but, the pandemic has really caused universities to look differently at the way that the modalities and ways that they're offering services and classes to our students, and given us actually a tremendous tool set to be able to do things that probably would have taken a long, long time for many more traditional universities to do. And so thinking about not just whether an online class could be helpful, but how can somebody finish online, finish in the evening? Is childcare available to help, individuals who are working and may not be able to leave during the day and may not have childcare in the evening? All of those things I think are very, very important. At 31,000 students here, we have 9,000 students who have dependents. And so universities really have to think a little bit out of the box here about traditional educational pathways and say, how do we better serve students based on their needs, not necessarily the traditional way we have always offered those courses. So the universities really have to rethink delivery, and our faculty and our programs are really doing that. So I think that causes this to be an exciting new venture. And I think it'll really help a lot of our students be able to finish that in a more traditional modality may not have had the ability to take time off and actually drive to the campus and attend classes during the day. Working adults really rarely have the flexibility to do that.
You mentioned faculty too, and Kaley, you had mentioned earlier just how many departments and offices and people around campus you're pulling together under Hornet Attain to make sure that comebacker students have the right supports to complete their credential. What do you hear from faculty? How are they having to change instruction and the classroom experience beyond, the things that we've already talked about, schedule changes and those kinds of things? But we know the learning itself is also shifting in some ways. What are you hearing from some of your faculty about, their shifting practices to better support adult learners?
I don't actually hear that other than the pieces that I just mentioned in terms of how the pandemic just shifted things. And it's funny, I'm fairly new to higher ed and joined Sac State just before the pandemic hit. And just in that bit of time, things weren't possible. And then a year later, everything was changing. And so I think it's just those components and figuring out, we should do some of these online, or asynchronous would be helpful as an option for some of our adult students who have families or other priorities or working during the day. And so I think it's really conversations around practices to support adult learners and get them in the classroom. I have not heard that much about actual in the classroom instruction changing that dramatically.
You do have to make some accommodations. A lot of the examples that, for instance, you mentioned I teach a freshman seminar. I also taught in our doctoral program. So I've got sort of both ends of the spectrum. And I have to use very different examples if I have a classroom where I've got, working professionals, adults with experience, people who already have their own families. It isn't going to connect as well if you're trying to teach a subject and you're using an example that an 18-year-old will connect with. That's very different than using an example a 37-year-old is going to connect with. And so it causes you to sort of rethink the way that you're teaching, the materials that you're going to use, the way that you're going to provide examples or projects to students, and really understanding that there's diversity in your classroom, that you really have to think about the different places people are in their lives and how that's going to impact their learning. So in that respect, I think it does cause faculty to really have to kind of rethink whether you use pedagogy or andragogy, whichever they're using, to really rethink how you're connecting with your students and how you're assessing, in some cases, the learning. Multiple choice tests might be great for traditional age students. They're not great for returning adults. Returning adults are going to be much better at doing short essays or projects where they can show you what they've done, which is more related to what they do in their work, already.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much, both of your perspectives. And what I'll note is that neither of you have said, oh, well, faculty are resistant of this or don't want to do that, which is such a narrative sometimes, right? And I appreciate you both kind of really covering it on both sides of the equation. Before I let you go, I mean, you've already put in, so much in place. And I know that you've had a lot of success. I guess I'm curious, what's the next hurdle? What's the next milestone? What's coming next for you all? Kaley, maybe we can start with you.
Sure. I know on our end, the next, there's a few pieces that we'd like to tackle sort of across the board. Credit for prior learning and getting that better integrated and implemented and more of a streamlined process and a consistent process across the university. It happens in pockets, but not sure it's happening consistently. Reverse transfer, which is partnerships with our community colleges, so the students who come to us from a community college but didn't get their associate's degree, but may have, with the coursework they've taken here, completed the requirements there, so they can get an associate's degree and get that boost, and then maybe come back to us and finish their bachelor's. And then an Adult Learner Success Center, a place on campus where adults and returning learners can be and network and see each other, that's available in hours that they can access it, and offer some of the services that they would need. Those are kind of the big rocks that we're hoping to turn over in the near future.
So just a few little items, huh?
Just a couple minor things.
Yeah, a couple of quick wins. How about from your perspective, Dr. Mills?
I really want to emphasize the idea of credit for prior learning. It is a different way, I think, for our faculty and departments to really think about the educational component of what they're attempting to achieve with students. But whether, it's a student that has a lot of experience in their field, whether it's a student veteran who has served in the armed forces and has a lot of training that they bring with them to the campus, that component, I think, is another one of those game changers. It's going to take us a little bit to wrap our heads and brains around that, but that's a game changer for students. And I really do like the idea of a returning adult student center. One of the doctoral students that I worked with last year, her dissertation was a case study on a returning adult center for a university in the Midwest. And, really reading the testimonials, listening to, what staff at that university had to say, it really, again, changed the interaction with the students and the university when they're really focusing on that returning student experience versus what their, more staff may be more used to with traditional age students. So you've got to specialize a little bit to make sure that you focus in on the needs of returning students.
Yeah. Well, thank you both for spending a bit of time with me. I think what you have going on is great, and I'm so glad you had a chance to share it with us. Kaley Martin, Project Management Specialist, and Dr. Ed Mills, Vice President of Student Affairs and Chief Enrollment Officer. I encourage everyone to check out your great work at Sacramento State and Horn and Attain. But thank you. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much.
And sorry, real quick, I do have the actual numbers if you want those on camera before we leave.
Sure. What are they?
Sure. So it's 256,738 adults over 25 in Sacramento County have some college no degree, and 62,000 are near completers.
Wow, that's some precision. That is some precision right there, Kaley. I love it.
Like, I made you wait for it. I got to be pretty precise.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you. I know we're at time. I really appreciate you all's time today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
We'll see you. There's a lot that we can learn from these examples and from the people that we've talked with in part one. And we need to learn what works and scale those solutions as quickly as possible in communities and states around the country. With nearly 1 in 4 U.S. adults having some college credit but no degree, we are leaving millions of talented people out of the workforce. And while movements like skills-based hiring, competency-based recognition give more steam, it's not enough to meet the workforce demand nor support the many adults who are seeking a more prosperous life for themselves and their families. through common sense approaches like providing advising during the outreach phase, forgiving past financial holds, recognizing prior courses and work experiences, and rescheduling classes to fit the lives of adult learners, we can provide a pathway for the millions of people who want and need to return to higher education. And if you are in a position to make change, remember that some change is better than none at all. Start small, dream big, aim high. Thank you for joining our two-part series this month. It's been a pleasure to have you with us. Our show is produced by Jacob Mann, John Strauss, and me, Dakota Palicki, with support from Matthew Jenkins, Amy Bartner, and the team at Site Strategics. Well Done Marketing supports the promotion of our show. Deborah Humphreys and Kevin Corcoran provide leadership for Lumina's strategic engagement efforts. Please be sure to subscribe and rate our show wherever you're getting your podcast from. If you have a comment or an idea for an episode, reach us at luminafoundation.org or reach me on Twitter at Dakota Palicki. Thank you so much for being with us. We'll see you next month.